Hey guys, Cock Enjoyer here, and today I want to discuss the new Cast and Crit Ascendancy, Blind Prophet. So there are plenty of other things you can do on this Ascendancy. This Ascendancy is just very good baseline, by the way, but like I am a huge Cock Enjoyer, and I'm sure if anybody who's followed my channel for a while knows that I play a lot of Cast and Crit builds, and I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't just spend like the past day just making a copious amount of Cast and Crit POBs. So like I can quickly go over some stuff that's like obviously really good with this that's not Cast and Crit. Like for example, this projectiles fired in random directions is incredible with rolling magma. Rolling magma normally does this, where it just like bounces further out. But with random directions, it can bounce out, bounce back, bounce out, bounce back. So like if you have like, let's say like 7, 8 chains with it, you can end up with 7, 8 hits. You usually don't get that many. It's like probably around half, a little bit more than that usually. But it is this random directions is a huge more multiplier on rolling magma. You have to do like weird slower proj scaling stuff, but I have a video on those mechanics if you're interested, and you can find that in my previous YouTube videos. The real Nito did a build on it last league as well. That guy's great. Follow him, please. And then other things that don't care about this random direction thing, like for example, GG has a really hard time in this event trying not to make Ascendancy just like absolutely cracked with Molten Strike. Molten Strike doesn't give a shit about this mod. At least the random direction part, but that 50% chance to return is over 50% more Molten Strike because the projectiles come out and they suck back in, meaning you get way more hits than what you initially hit with. So, and then additional projectiles are literally direct multipliers for Molten Strike's damage. So this Ascendancy is absolutely crazy for that. You take a base 5 crit weapon, it goes up to like 12, like Rebuke of the Vol. Gains 7 base crit from this, like a giant Reaver Sword gains 7 base crit from this, a huge like 2-handed axe gains 7 base crit from this. So essentially, Ascendancy is obviously insane with Molten Strike. Particularly like Molten Strike of the Zenith because you're not going to go poison with that. And like there are 2 very good poison Ascendancies for Molten Strike already in this event. But this one in Oshabi and Arakali. But this right here is like with Zenith, Jesus. But there's plenty of other stuff, obviously, like Splitting Steel is very good with return. Random directions is going to be a little awkward if you don't attack fast enough. But additional projectiles also directly multiply Splitting Steel's damage. But like I said, I've already talked about all that kind of stuff, so let's just get past that. Now, the 7 base crit here is essentially what has absolutely stun locked me over the past day. I want to show you guys with math why this 12% base crit is just absolutely ridiculous. So with 12% base crit, it means you need 733% increased crit to cap. With increased critical strike support on top of that, you need 473% increased crit to cap. With Assassin's Mark on top of those 2 things, you need 411% to crit to cap. Since it is incredibly easy to get power charges through like either the quality on Assassin's Mark, if you're a bow build, you can do Manaforged plus any skill plus power charge on crit. If you can trigger a spell, you can do a power charge on crit on that. Infinite ways to get like a power charge. So let's just say we have +1 power charge on the tree, right? With all those charges, with precision and arrogance, and again, this goes higher with aura effect. This is just as a baseline, assuming you have no aura effect on the tree. And then you have a Diamond Flask with a 40% increased crit chance suffix. And then ideally with Flash Charge and crit, that will be up very, very high amount of the time if you hit very frequently. Either like a cast on crit build or just something attacks really quick like Cyclone, Molten Strike, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff, right? So with all this 400% is literally enough to just cap you. This is with nothing on the tree besides like taking a single power charge node or 50% crit somewhere, you are crit capped. That is such a ridiculously low floor that you get to be crit for pretty much free on every single thing on this Ascendancy. Let's say you're playing a poison cast and crit build and you don't want to use increased critical strike support in Assassin's Mark because you are not going perfect agony because this 12% base crit does not affect spells, so there's going to be a huge disparity there. But so let's say that's the case. So you have 12%, you need 733. Well, Ungle's Harmony is 420, so now we only need 310%. So let's just say we have 4 power charges again, and then precision plus arrogance. Now we need 40% crit chance somewhere. We don't even need the Diamond Flask. We can just have 40% crit chance on the tree, or just that on another flask as a suffix with the gain of flash charge and crit mod. So yeah, this Ascendancy just lets you go crit pretty much immediately and pretty much for free. So there's like very, very small amount of commitment here. That alone makes this Ascendancy very good. It could have no other nodes, and I think it would actually be pretty decent. So I just kind of started diving into this, and there's so many things this enables that I like can't even begin to explain. Like for example, Cospri's Malice is a 5.5 base crit weapon, and this gets 6.5 base crit from it. Cospri's Malice in the current state of PoE is very underpowered. I would say Cospri's Malice cast and crit like builds are pretty much strictly worse than all the other variants because Bow CoC is easily over double the damage of like Cyclone cast on crit. Lancing Steel cast on crit is easily over double the damage of Cyclone cast on crit, and having to actually overcome Cospri's Malice, and that's like not even accounting for having to overcome Cospri's Malice, like terrible base crit, but also it's like pretty mediocre damage stats as a weapon. So this giving that base crit kind of undoes a lot of that. It's still not going to be more damage than a Lancing Steel cast and crit build or a Bow cast and crit build, but it's going to be like half-ish damage now. But honestly, it's also going to be like a lot of people just love that archetype. Like Cyclone cast and crit Ice Nova is one of the most classic PoE builds of all time, I feel like. So I'll go over that as well. Even though, like I said, it's a little bit weaker, but a lot of people really love the way it feels, and it is quite smooth. So I'll discuss that. On top of that, same exact argument for Mjolnir. Same way, 5 base crit, gain 7 base crit from this, even more than Cospri's. The Fire Axe trigger Runecraft enchant. It is you have to craft it onto an axe, which all axes are 5 base crit. I guess besides the two-hander Flesh Ripper goes up to 7.5, but that's kind of a different scenario because like you normally want to use a Squire in your offhand with that because it just like directly lets you support. Like essentially it gives you like a 6 link for your trigger weapon. But anyways, besides all that, so those pretty much all work the same way. But there are tons of unique weapons where this is just like a huge add to. Like for example, have you ever seen somebody do cast on crit with Widowhail before? No, but I'm going to have a ton of builds that I'm going over with that because getting 7 base crit on Widowhail unlocks like a ton of weird stuff. There are really powerful unique quiver effects. There are really powerful generic quiver effects, like especially influence ones. But like things like Scorpion's Call is going to give you like over 100 AoE from your quiver. You could get like 700 regen, tons of proj damage, and all that's kind of weird stuff. With something like Rearguard, you just get max block immediately. You get 50% spell block, and then you get tons of proj damage and tons of projectile speed, which like, for example, not cast on crit, like Widowhail, Rearguard, like Spark is already like a pretty good build. It's not like super good early because the scaling's just like not, I mean, the projectile speed's incredible, but Spark's not the highest damage skill. But what if you could cast on crit it now? It's like, well, now your trigger rate is like ridiculously fast, and you get to play the better Spark and Spark of the Nova because the lower cast speed does not hurt it at all, and you get more projectiles to get even more coverage. So, yeah, I'm gonna get into all that stuff because it is just wild. Now there's like other stuff in the Ascendancy I can quickly go over. This explosion is pretty similar. I mean, this is really just like kind of like Asenath chant, the unique gloves. So the difference is the explosion is a bit bigger. Asenath is 3%, this is 5%. Restless is going to be pretty decent on a lot of stuff, but where it's really going to shine is a build that is like purely fizz damage and scaling it. Like for example, I don't know, let's say you're playing like a Widowhail, Cast on Crit, Exsanguinate, Ethereal Knives build, and you're scaling Fizz's Extra with like Ming's Heart, Vile Arrow Quiver, and stuff like that. So you just have like you have like over 100% of your damage is extra chaos, and then you're taking a bunch of generic increased damage. This explosion's gonna deal way more than 5%, and you're gonna get some really big pops covering the screen. So outside of that, like things that are scaling generic damage, actually really similar to I did a video recently on Stampede from PoE 2, like the boots that create the shockwave explosion effect. These kind of explosions scale in a pretty similar way. It's generic damage, and you want to either scale generic damage or damage is extra to actually really juice them, to like really take advantage of this and like really help it give you like screen clearing potential. This node, just kind of incredible. It's just like, so this is not going to look like insane on paper, but this is going to give you really high uptime on a ton of movement speed and damage avoidance, which honestly, it just feels really good. This 50%, you really wish it was worded like 50% of your max elusive or whatever, because if you scale your elusive effect to like 300% with like claws or something weird, it's still going to go from like 300 to 250 to 200 to all the way down to 50%. Then it's going to reset. So like if you don't have elusive effect, this is actually this mod's a little bit better for you than otherwise, as weird as that sounds. This is like absolutely insanity, like late game scaling potential, but you really need good gear to take advantage of this. So I'm probably not going to go over this much today because I generally like to talk about things like in early league scenarios where this is a late game thing. It is very, very strong. It's just early. This is not going to be super useful to you. But like once you're like 10, like 15 abyssal jewel sockets on your gear, it's like, damn, you know, like you just get all of your max life from that, and you don't even need max life on the tree, which is, there's like tons of things you could build around with that. Shade form, I don't know. This is like a 40-second cooldown, I believe. So I'm not really sure if this is useful. I haven't really looked into it. I know the skill duration is going to help that a lot, but I don't know. Not super high on that. Also not super high on this. This is very good early league because before you have it, this effect is essentially what you get from anathema. So like, for example, if you needed 2 unique rings, this is really powerful, but just being able to use anathema makes this like kind of redundant. But again, early, this is a ton of power, which is nice. It's like stuff like this is really good. Or like even if you need double unique ring, like let's say you're using like double Ming's Heart or something, right? Like then you get to do this, which then it becomes insane. Obviously, this whole effect is really good with Duedry Scorn, the helmet that gives you extra chaos damage per curse, etc., etc. But okay, so let's actually get into the builds because there's a lot I want to discuss, and I'm pretty stoked. The first build I want to talk about is complete nonsense and enabled by this Ascendancy, and that is max block, rear guard, Widowhail, cast on crit. This one is a Widowhail cast on crit Spark build. So the way this setup is actually working is we just have Blast Rain, cast on crit Spark. You can use Rain of Arrow Saturation if you would like. Just a quick side note on this. Blast Rain allows you to have 2 spells to trigger for free that will not affect the trigger rate in any meaningful way. Like for example, this Spark gets triggered 7.5 times a second. If you drop one of these supports and put another spell in here, that one will also trigger 7.5 times a second. It's just how frequently Blast Rain hits. Since we are not triggering a second spell here, it could make sense to use Rain Arrow of Saturation. I do not like the way this skill feels, but this is just an option, just something to keep in mind. And similarly for that, we have a Manaforged cast on crit set up to also trigger your Spark of the Nova, which is, it'll be Blast Rain or Rain of Arrow Saturation again, keeping the cost as low as possible to the 7 so that it costs no mana over here, because as you can see, this Blast Rain needs to cost no mana. So that means that anytime we spend mana on our primary Blast Rain, it will trigger our Manaforged setup. Now, PoE does not calculate Manaforged as a valid cast on crit enabler, so that's why I have it disabled here, because it will destroy our damage, because it does not think you can cast on crit off of this. It'll think we're self-casting, which we are not. In game, obviously, you would have this on. Okay, anyways, so that is like our primary setup. And then we have a helmet, which has trigger socket spells when you focus, and we have 4 curses in, which is a mark, and then 3 curses here. You could also mark on hit this and put like another skill here, or just like nothing, essentially. Maybe like a life tap or inspiration, so this cost isn't so insane. But that is because our Ascendancy is this. So we have Sightless, 12 base crit initially, and then I'll just show you in the infographics, I think it's easier. We are going to take Sightless, and then we are going to take Shapeless, because this will just make you feel pretty zoomy. Hilariously, this 12% crit chance means that if you really wanted to, at level 38, you could go cast on crit immediately. Based on this like infographic I was showing, you need this amount of crit, but with power charges in the tree, increase critical strikes, and then something like this mastery over here, increase critical strikes in full life. It actually is pretty trivial to be cast on critting immediately. The real problem when you try to do that like immediately is solving for the mana cost. Might need to buy like a Praxis if you're in Trade League, or just wait until you have Elrond, unfortunately. Taking this because it's just going to help us zoom. We are taking Restless for the explosions with Curse on hit, and then this for maximum curses equal to our power charges. You can get this with Anathema, which you would eventually drop that later once you do have Anathema, but I know, you know, like at League Start, you're not going to have that. I would probably be getting that node in Uber Lab regardless. So this node, not incredible. It's, I don't think going to help our clear a ton, because we are not scaling fizz damage or generic damage very hard at all, so these explosions are going to be quite weak. But we do need it to get Faithless. Later on, entirely unsure what I would actually drop. Like, eventually you want to go Lightless, and then the last node's kind of just like whatever. But again, the entire thing is built around this being so good, the other nodes don't really matter. But I think I would ideally go Lightless to get a ton of life scaling from this. You could do this Directionless, because this does not hurt Spark in any meaningful way, especially the Nova variety, because it's going to do that regardless. It's going to shoot everything everywhere anyway. Now, this skills fire 2 additional projectiles. You could then include a second spell in your setup to do something like to get more damage out of that. Initially, I was having Blazing Salvo, but the problem is Blazing Salvo doesn't get super harmed by the random direction projectiles, but we have no AoE scaling, and you probably need to get some and then maybe a little bit more, because when you do have this random node here, it is going to like fan out, and when it returns, it will suck back in and do a lot of damage. But that initial fan out is not going to be great if you don't have AoE to help with the overlap. So that's kind of why I opted to just have one spell here. But you definitely could play another spell here and just take this path. Like once you don't need Faithless and you don't feel like you need these explosions, then you could do this and then the Shapeless, and then you're kind of just good. Like then your Ascendancy is pretty solid. It's just this. I need to find a skill that I think makes sense to actually include in this setup right now, which I don't have anything that I'm like super high on. So, but that is entirely up to you. Now, I think there's like nothing else like super interesting about the gear. It's just Duedry, because we're not a self-cast build, so this is just a huge more multiplier for us. We have Elrion on 3 different slots because we want to get the cost extremely low. Thankfully, or not thankfully, it's kind of crazy that since we trigger it so much, it's still 300 mana a second, which is why we have actually, like if you'll see our leech here, this fixes the trigger rate, but you want to turn this off when you want to actually see what your true mana leech is. I have this to just fix the blast drain trigger rate because it's a little off in PoE. But if you do that, like so, like we scale mana leech quite hard. Like we take instant leech here, and then I actually take more mana leech right here. You could take this to make it even more, but I think 350 should be about enough because we also get some mana gain on hit as well from like this miner. And we're going to get instant leech from all of our different Manaforged setups, which is, in this case, it's just going to be this blast drain. But also to keep in mind, like to get enough leech, you need to get flat from somewhere, which thankfully, this interaction is very powerful. And that Wrath is a more multiplier on Spark, but it is flat for attacks. Honestly, kind of in this setup, you kind of wish it was flat for Spark as well. But since it is flat to attacks, that's going to really help us actually deal enough damage with hit damage on blast drain to leech, because otherwise, you would probably want to use like added lightning here. That's what I was doing initially. And it's like, oh, duh, Wrath actually works for attacks, because you need at least one of these to hit hard enough that you can leech from. Since we actually spend so much mana, you will be able to use Sigil of Power for single target. You will very easily hit this max stack, which is, as you can see, a ton of damage, but I don't want to have it because it's going to be, looks like PoE padding. But in bossing, you will 100% have this up just based on how much mana you spend. You easily spend, like I have it configured to be 380 mana, you easily spend that in a second. So very, very, very powerful, tons of damage. I think that's pretty much it for the gear and the tree, because like just generic ES evasion, this could be pure evasion, doesn't really matter. I would like to get spell block crafted onto it to help try to get closer to max spell block here. You could go for a spell block implicit over that Fizz taken as, but we're super weak to Fizz, as you can see here. So that's why I have that. I think that makes, like I also have it on our helmet here as well. A belt, very important to get 14% CDR for cast on crit. As you can see, that will destroy our trigger rate, because your trigger rate is 6 seconds or 6 times a second by default, but it goes up to 7.5 with 14% cooldown or higher. You don't need to have the veiled mod. The crafted mod goes up to 12%, and then you can also get the remaining 2% on an abyssal jewel. It is a prefix. The 3% one is quite rare, but the 2% is really not that hard to roll with alt spamming. So it's always 2% at worst possible roll, and it goes on any of the abyssal jewels. Rocket, because I'm Rocket main, obviously, and we have a really easy time of keeping frenzy charges up. We have them currently from the Mark Mastery here, but you can also have them from here, and this will help automate make your power charge a little more consistent too. I was a little worried about sockets, but you could definitely do this and then drop this. But I just think this is going to be comfier, not having to struggle with sockets nearly as much. But because I would also like to fit in a guard skill, which I don't have here. It would be like cast when damage taken, Immortal Call, lowest possible level of each. Okay, I think that's pretty much it for this build. I guess I could show how much damage this actually is. So this anathema effect is absolutely absurd. It like literally is almost makes our damage 3 times as high, having all these marks on. Well, I guess it would be, I can't show it because just the mark, but it ends up, it's way over double our damage having all these curses. Yeah, I think that is pretty much everything for this. I don't have anything I think that I want to talk about otherwise for this. Oh yeah, eventually you would like to upgrade to a duration ring for Spark, like one of these dusk rings. And then obviously the anathema, like I said, and then possibly this like large cluster jewel I really do like the idea of, just because it'll get us to our spell block, which will mean like we truly get degenerate amounts of not getting hit. If you can get this hit pool higher, you can go acrobatics and get like real silly with it. And then we just like have like no chance to actually get hit like ever. But you do need to have a bigger max hit pool so that you don't get one tap by like a big spell or something. So it's definitely a direction you could take the build. So one last thing I want to go over on a rearguard like max block cast and crit setup like this is I think eventually it makes sense to go iron reflexes. This is not a real build, by the way. This is just I forgot to showcase this part of the like progression. But I think once you have your block to like 75 and like plus like for both these right here, I think it makes sense to try to solve your Fizz max hit, which is a pretty big problem on the other PB as you saw. And this helps with that a ton. And it gets really ridiculous when our Molten Shell's up. As you can see, our max hit goes up like our Fizz max hit goes up past 20,000. Which you can automate this, you can manually click it, you can cast when damage taken, and that's just preference. It seems a little inflated because I have these flasks enabled, but I want to point out something that I don't know if everybody is aware of, but this flash charge and crit mod, so this has a cooldown of 0.1 second. So it means you can only get 10 flash charges a second, but that is scaled by you can get that higher with increased charge recovery and stuff like that. But the point is, you can get that either here, or you can get it from like a hunter belt. I'm probably not using this base, if we're being honest, but flash charge and crit. You can reforge crit to actually get this, but you want to have this with like increased max life and flat life on a belt. But anyways, that's like the super min max. But you can also get that mod on Watcher's Eye with precision. But long story short, if you've never played a build like this before, where you're critting like an obscene amount of times a second, you will be getting a flash charge at 0.1 second, at 0.2 seconds, at 0.3 seconds, at 0.4. So you will be getting 10 flash charges spread throughout your flasks every second. And if your flasks only have like this one's only 15, this one unfortunately is 30, but it also has this mod which sucks because it kind of eats up a bunch of these charges. So ideally when you're bossing, you might want to turn this off because onslaught doesn't scale your damage. But oh, I don't have reduced charges in that one. But yeah, so like these get down to 20. These will be up a lot more than you would think. If you've never played a build like this, you would be shocked to find out that when you're bossing, it feels pretty Pathfinder-esque when your flasks are just constantly going off, which is pretty surprising to me the first time I actually did this. But I'm a huge believer in this, like when you're min-maxing this kind of build, because it's like Mage Blood at home. Obviously, significantly worse, but you know. All right, I think that's it. A build I'm sure a lot of you are very nostalgic for, and that is a Cospri Ice Nova cast on crit. Not Assassin, unfortunately. Really sorry about this error. I'm not sure why this PoE is causing that, but anyways, this build is actually quite good and has really good damage for the level of gear that it has. So this like 5.8 million that this build has, while that is very similar to the Spark PoE that we were talking about previously, I was talking about how the arena is going to scale like the Spark's damage, so it won't consistently be that high almost ever. This build will have like 5.8 million on single target pretty consistently because Ice Nova is just fucking massive. If you look at this like 3.4 radius, all 4 of those are going to hit the boss extremely frequently. Every once in a while, you'll maybe only hit with 3 or 2, but on average, you are going to have pretty close to this 5 mil damage, if not like almost always. And this can obviously get bigger as you scale the AoE harder and you get better projectile behavior on your skills. So just quickly going over the gear, we have just generic spell damage on Hardened Field. I'd try to get like 100 spell damage here. You get +1 to cold spells also as well, in addition to spell damage. I mean, honestly, you'd prefer to have both together, but that's a little higher investment. You can even use the Supreme Spike Shield just to get a little bit of better like defenses, like more ES, more evasion, and a little bit more suppression. You can even get Spell Crit to get a little bit of damage out of it. Helmet, just evasion, defenses again, suppression. Fizz taken as trigger because our Ascendancy that we're taking are the exact same as the last one with Spark. We're taking Sightless, and then we're taking Shapeless for Elusive for a little bit more zoomy, and then Restless for Explodies, and then your curse limit is equal to your power charges. And this build, Restless, the Exploding node, I think is pretty much going to do almost nothing because Ice Nova is so big. I can't imagine this really helps our clear. We don't scale generic damage very well or Fizz at all. We are literally taking it just to get the curse limit is equal to your power charges. Now, once again, you can drop this once you get anathema, but on League Start, this Faithless node is a fuck ton of damage. A like truly like double your damage plus kind of node. So it is very worth it, but eventually once you get anathema, you know, it's like it starts to fall off. And then that's when you can start either looking to stack Abyssal Jewels with Lightless to get a ton of life out of that, or if you would really like, you can pick up Directionless and then Careless for +2 proj so that you can drop returning projectiles on your Frostbolt, possibly drop GMP as well, maybe put slower proj in there, or some other kind of utility that I can't think of right now. But again, it doesn't really matter because this entire Ascendancy and the reason that we would be playing this build is strictly for this base 12 crit. Let me show you, like for example, let's just drop our Ascendancy. Okay, it lowers our damage to 1/3 of what it is, and that's because if you'll see, our Cyclone stops critting. But with the Ascendancy, it just is comically easy to cap our crit. Like we don't need this Diamond Flask up. I don't even think we need power charges up. Okay, we're like just under without the power charges. But yeah, essentially it's super easy. This Diamond Flask will be up extremely high amount of time, like literally all the time on single target if this is the only flask you have that has this flash charge and crit mod. I don't think this build will crit a ridiculous amount to where you could maintain like 3 flasks with this effect on it, but 1 Diamond Flask definitely. Again, we're using Doedger's Tenure because we are a trigger build, so this is just free spell damage. You don't need the Frenzy Charge here, and in fact, this is a good segue into be really careful about attack speed. So where Lancing Steel Spraying, Blast Rain, Rain Arrow Saturation, those skills hit so frequently that it doesn't actually matter what your attack rate is because they hit enough that the cast and crit proc will check and it will be fine. Cyclone, you do not want to go over your attack speed because it is very, very 1-to-1. Like, as you see, if I go over attack speed, we lose about 14% of our damage. So you really want to stay under 7.5. Initially, before you have 14% cooldown recovery, whether it's crafted on the belt plus an abyssal jewel to get to 14, or another 5% from your boots, it's an eldritch implicit. Your trigger rate, I think, is 6.5. I never stay at that rate, so I actually honestly don't even remember what it is. We can quickly check real quick. Trigger rate cap. Oh, it is just 6. Okay. So before you have the CDR here, which I would recommend getting as soon as humanly possible if you switch this build, because it's very hard to stay under 6 attacks per second with something with a fast weapon like Cospri's. And it's just more damage anyway. But long story short, you want to stay under 6 attacks per second. I think that's pretty much it for our gear. The only thing remaining really is, so we have like Elrion in 2 locations to lower the cost of our Ice Nova frostbolts. And also to keep in mind on that, we are triggering a frostbolt GMP returning proj in our Cospris, which again, like I said, you could potentially drop this if you want to take these effects on the Ascendancy. But if you are struggling to maintain the mana cost, you can lower this frostbolt mana cost to 1 because, as you see, it only adds like 400,000 damage. So if this starts hurting your mana sustain, just lower the cost on this to 1, or lower the level on frostbolt to 1. It's fine. The reason you would potentially want to spend this much mana is in single target if you were using Sigil of Power, which is a ton of damage. I don't even know if I have it enabled here, but as you can see, it ends up being quite a bit of damage, and it will be up if you can maintain. It's only about 20% more damage, actually. It's a little less than I would think, but that's because we're penning cold so hard. But anyways, free damage if you can maintain it. Otherwise, lower the cost of frostbolt. And like obviously, just like the last build, we are putting all of our curses in our trigger helmet. Like I said. So when you get to a boss, you just press that focus button, and those curses will be up for like 10 seconds, which conveniently, that's how long the cooldown is on the focus trigger. So once the focus cooldown's back up, you press it again and just reapplies them. Assassin's Mark you don't need to have here, but it is very nice. Yeah, sorry, I was struggling to find it. I have it mark on hit right here. And the reason for that is because I want to have these 2 here instead of power charge and crit of my frostbolt. So we're just going to... It's not like a huge deal because we'll have it up in single target because we have quality on our Assassin's Mark, which gives you power charge, but I actually end up taking these nodes over here because they're just decent for damage anyway. So when we're mapping, we're going to get power charges on kill here. And then when a mark hits a rare boss, we're going to have it consistently up in single target for that reason. The reason I am like happily coming over here, you could potentially not come over here. But the reason I wanted to is because like 1, we get exposure here and this is like good damage. And then getting another power charge, while pretty decent for our damage anyway, is because it enables us to use Enfeebled, which is really nice defensively. Like it sounds like a meme, right? But I would pretty happily use a Mark of Submission with Enfeeble in it. It's just a huge amount of mitigation. As you can see, it's just pretty much a Fortify. That's just what Enfeeble is. It's Cursed Rare Unique, deal 18% less damage, but against like normal mobs, it's like 30% less damage, which is just a shit ton. It feels very comfy. It just makes you a lot safer. You could consider, and it probably makes more sense to not have to give up your ring slot to just, because the Frenzy here is again 4% more damage because we can't really scale our build off of attack speed at all. So you could get Enfeeble here. The difference is this Enfeeble is only going to be like 10% less damage taken, but it is still quite good and still worth getting. Just kind of either of those are pretty good. You can get a spell-based crit on Doedries too. You don't need attack-based crit because it's like comically easy to cap that. Yeah, this build has probably so much crit that the crit implicits on corruptions on Doedries tenure probably aren't very good for you, honestly. Really just Enfeeble or that Frenzy charge. I think that's pretty much it. This build is very straightforward. Just typical Cyclone cast on crit stuff. Inspiration to lower our mana cost. Arrogance, precision on our life because we just need the accuracy. And then, like I said, Sigil Power single target. I'm using Skitterbots here because we have no shock. It's just decent damage. You could instead have a Zealotry here. You can't use Hatred anymore now that it's just Fizzes Extra. But Zealotry is not a very good aura. The Consecrated Ground can be kind of nice, so you can consider it over Skitterbots. But if we get to use Skitterbots, we also get to include Herald of Ice, which unfortunately in current PoE 1, unless you're actually scaling the damage, this is not going to kill very much, but it's an aesthetic. It's going to make the build feel a lot better, even though it doesn't really do that much. It gives you a little bit of damage, but it's really not going to help your clear a ton. You can consider supporting this with like a 4-link if you'd really like your Herald of Ice to deal something, or putting it in like a pair of Thunder Fists. But at baseline right now, it's not going to kill very much, unfortunately. But again, I don't really think you really need it. Ice Nova is just fucking massive. I think this build is very good, like surprisingly, because I have not been able to say that in a really long time. because I just thought this build was just so mediocre for so long, and I think it's finally back. One side note on this is you can switch this build pretty much once you get a Cospri, and I wouldn't switch before you get Elrion, it's just going to be uncomfortable. But once you have Elrion and Cospris, you can then switch the build. That's literally all you need. Ideally, you have a leveled Ice Nova frostbolts and like a 5-link. But as your first Ascendancy, if you do want to play this, I would choose one of the other Shadow Ascendancies. I would choose Surfcaster and take Ghost of the Deep and just not get your second Ascendancy like kind of forever, honestly. You can if you want. It's just, this is enough to carry you for a really, really long time. Or you could go Servant or Call if you want to go Poison and get Envy, and then you don't need to get other Ascendancy nodes either, because Envy will carry you through the campaign as well. You can go Blind Prophet and try to go Cast and Crit immediately, like I said. Like, you can literally start playing it at 38 if you want. You're just going to need to get like this crit chance against full enemies on full life mastery here. Get a little bit more crit in the tree. The reason I don't recommend going Cast and Crit immediately is just because of mana sustain issues with Elrond. You can get around it by using like Praxis, but it's kind of up to you. So, you know, choose if you want. Like, I am a big beach to maps enjoyer. I want to play what I want to play like as soon as humanly possible. So if you do want to do that, I completely understand. Just, you know, grab a Praxis or two and get to town. The damage will be quite good, and it'll probably be more fun anyway. So, all right, I think that's pretty much it. All right, so this next one I'm pretty excited for. I know you guys are thinking, oh, it's just another quad cock bow build, you idiot. But hear me out. Let me give my elevator pitch. So this is a quad cock poison EK Exsanguinate build, but I think it's got some pretty cool stuff going on. So this explosion effect that I was talking about is going to be pretty mediocre on the Ice Nova build and like okay on Spark. I think it'll be quite good here because this 5% of their life as physical damage explosion, along with asenath, which I assume it just stacks with. I can't remember if it's 2 explosions, making it 8%, or if it's just 2 separate ones. Either way, we are scaling Fizz really hard and generic damage really hard and poison, which this explosion will deal. So let me get into the details. So we are using Widowhail plus Maloney's Mechanism again. Or, well, not Maloney's Mechanism, but Widowhail again, because if you look at the damage we get out of this, it's actually really comical. 150% more damage out of our Maloney's Nightfall. Just a, you know, casual, complete shit quiver, by the way. Anyways, I don't think I've ever used this thing. But it's pretty decent, I guess, for poison, like super early. But regardless, we're getting 200% generic damage from this. We are getting a little over 50% of Fizz's extra chaos damage from this quiver. And we have about 100% increased Fizz damage on the tree, 50% chaos damage here, generic damage from trickery, tons of poison scaling, obviously. So that is all going to scale our explosion damage, making it much bigger, and then it's going to be Fizz's extra chaos, which it also gets scaled it. But we have 80% generic chance to poison as well. Sorry, I'm trying to switch to show that we have 80% generic chance to poison from that explosion. And that is going to make it deal a ton of damage. So it's going to kill a lot more than it normally would. Meaning like, I think EK plus Exsanguinate with like chain already have like pretty decent clear, but I think with the explosion, this might be quite juicy. Now let me get into the actual details of the build. So we are using Ungol's Harmony to crit cap. As I mentioned earlier, it just is comically easy to crit cap with this 12% base crit in Ungol's. We don't have it catalyzed because this is like the budget version of this. So we get like 335% crit from it. Oh, by the way, just I should quickly side note, I have a higher budget version because I thought this sounded kind of sick, so I like made it like juicy one. I was like, let's make it a little juicier. But yeah, you can look at those if you'd like. You can get way more damage than this, but this is like where I kind of stopped. 15 mil is, and the clear is going to be way better on this version too because it's got everything chained. So anyways, pretty stoked. Regardless, okay, so sorry, back to the build. So we have like 335% crit chance here, so we need 400%. We pick up 1 power charge in the tree because I want to dual socket anyway. So now we need 200%. We take a bunch of aura effect that just scales our damage anyway. We have precision plus arrogance because we need a hit. That's 100%. And then we end up taking this cluster, which is this Dire Torment cluster, which used to be one of the best clusters in the tree for crit poison before Perfect Agony. This build does not have a easy time getting like complete crit cap for our spells, but it's like way over 50%, making Dire Torment an incredibly good damage cluster for us and getting the rest of our crit that we need. We must have a little bit somewhere else because that'd be like a little light, be like 40% light. We have crit chance on a suffix somewhere. Nope. Okay, I guess we're good enough anyway. Okay, so rest of the gear, just generic life suppression stuff. I have Pierce on our helmet. You get Pierce on the tree if you'd like. That is specifically just for EK, because if you look at our Ascendancy, we are taking Sightless again, obviously. And then we are also taking Directionless because we have Ethereal Knights of the Massacre, which is a Nova effect, so it just super doesn't matter that this is random. It's already doing that. But then projectiles have 50% chance to return to you is just 50% more damage on Ethereal Knives because with that pierce. It's going to go through an enemy and it's going to come back half the time, which is just 50% more damage for that skill. The remaining stuff, we are taking explosions like I mentioned. And then the last one is we are taking Shapeless. You could take Faithless for this, your curse limit is equal to your power charges to avoid having to take one extra curse in the tree. But since I really only want one extra curse and we pass right by it anyway, I don't think it's a big deal to get it. And on top of that, I kind of want this non-curse enemies you inflict non-curses or blah, blah, blah on are blinded for 4 seconds. Which I guess technically we're going to get, yeah, because I still kind of want it on single target, right? Because we still want that blind, because we still want that blind effect, because otherwise we don't blind single target enemies. Okay, so I still don't want this mastery. I was like, yeah, do I actually want that? But you can get Source of Blind from like, I believe it's also a Abyssal Jewel, which I have in I think our latest version. Yeah, I have Abyssal Jewel here for blind on hit, so you don't have to worry about that. But long story short, this is a budget version, so we're getting blind the easiest way we can, which is just here in this. Okay. I'm trying to think of anything else to chat about. Oh yeah, so it's kind of awkward that our main clear setup, which is this cast on crit Ethereal Knives plus Exsanguinate, is kind of like our less good clear one because it just has Pierce and then return on the EK, but the Exsanguinate doesn't have chain or anything. But I think if I don't toot my own horn, I guess, or if I can toot my own horn, I guess, I would say I think this is pretty clever. I was struggling to find a way to get the mana cost of this Blast Drain less than this one, because you can't use Inspiration on your Manaforged cast on crit setup over here because these skills gain nothing from Inspiration. You could do it, it's just like, why would you it kind of defeats the purpose of actually doing this. But then I was like, oh shit, it would really help our clear if we did Chain, and Chain doesn't actually affect our Blast Drain. So it actually doesn't increase the mana cost of this at all, which lets you leave the mana cost at the second Blast Drain at 0. But it is going to increase the cost of these, which doesn't really matter. It's just the clear on this is going to be pretty sick. And it doesn't affect the Blast Drain, which means that every time we attack with this primary Blast Drain to trigger EK plus Exang, it's also going to trigger our Manaforged to do the same thing again. So I think it's pretty cool. Typical, just extra 4-link Manaforged with Frenzy, Power Charge, and Toxic Rain and Withering. I'm less sure on whether... So it's saying this is like 1 billion damage because this is our stacks of Wither. But I'm unsure if I actually want to do this first. I mean, early on I think it makes sense, but you could just do something like Rain Arrow of Saturation here and then have a Withering Touch if you don't want to go this route. It ends up being a little tight on sockets because you could do 1 Manaforge plus Frenzy, Power Charge, and then another Manaforge, Rain of Arrows plus Withering Touch or something like that. Or some combination of that if you have enough sockets. I'm not sure how consistent this Toxic Rain and Withering feels, so I am not entirely sure if this is correct. I personally have not done this. I've mostly done like extra stuff with Withering Touch support on hit. Later on, like so obviously with like Sin's Rebirth, you get Unholy Might, which gives you Wither on hit when you hit enemies. But later on, you want to get something like oh, do I not even have it here? Oh, I do in this version. Okay, like on the juiced version. You want to get Overwhelming Malice, which is a 10% chance on critical strike, which we're casting crit builds, this is going to be up all the time. This will say that your hits have 25% chance to inflict Wither on hit. So you'll have 15 Wither stacks pretty much always once you get this mod from I don't remember if you can get it. Yeah, you can only get it on a large chaos. I was going to say, I think you can get it on a fizz, large fizz, but you cannot. So use this cluster with Overwhelming Malice. That's the most important thing to actually get consistent. Like I said, you can do other ways to trigger your Wither and hit, but I haven't tested the Withering Touch with Toxic Rain Withering, so if this is bad, I'm sorry. I just have not tested it. I think that's pretty much it for, honestly, everything, like generic CDR belt, Elrion on our rings to maintain our stuff, generic resistance stuff everywhere else. I can quickly talk about like slightly juicier versions. So these are just going to be included, but this Hunter Quiver, getting projectile speed, like a ton of projectile speed is awesome for scaling the feel of EK. It's going to just go way off screen. Move speed, we're going to be like, this version is way zoomier. As you can see, it's like a ridiculous amount of movement speed because you can get that as implicit. That part's just nice to have. But the big one is this chance to poison on hit plus that increased damage with poison. So that's just going to give us like a little over 100% generic increased damage with poison. But it's also going to give us, what is it like 65% generic chance to poison, which means that we really don't need chance to poison anywhere. Actually, I just get a little bit on, like, I just convert all our in up here to chance to poison on tattoos, and that literally gives us 100% chance to poison. The beauty of that is that also scales the explosion, so we don't need poison anywhere. We don't need to use Herald of Agony anymore. We can just, we get back a ton by being able to do something like that. So it's pretty sick. The the thing that gets really, really ridiculous is once you get like a CoC bow, we would be getting a shaped CoC bow with cast on crit, socket gems chain additional time, and then multi-modded with Fizz's extra chaos plus +2 to socket support gems. Then you'd use Empower in your main links here, which I have set up right. Yeah, so like Empower here, and then obviously you'd like this to be like Awaken Empower, but you know, that's even more budget. But yeah, you can get that chain mod on Shaper and on Crusader. So you could technically Awaken Resorb a Shaper bow plus Crusader to get them to guarantee them together, and then pray to multi-mod after. But I'm not honestly sure because that chain mod's pretty rare. So crafting this bow is kind of a nightmare. But yeah, because the fact is the cast on crit's a prefix, chain's a suffix. So even if you Awaken Resorb, there's no guarantee that you can multi-mod a good bow after that. You might just completely brick it. It's kind of tough. Using a Marathon bow because it's a ton of movement speed, and this Ascendancy just gives you 12 base crit, so the base doesn't matter. So I just picked the one that has the most movement speed because the damage on the bow doesn't matter. So might as well get some move speed out of it. But you could do something else like, I mean, honestly, no, I don't really think there is another bow that even makes sense. Like if you're going Perfect Agony, you could use the Crit Quiver and do that. The reason we are not going Perfect Agony is if you quickly look here, we have pretty decent crit chance on like Exsanguinate and Ethereal knives, but like they both, I think they both have 6 base crit, right? Yeah, which is not a ton. So our weapon has literally double the base crit of this. So we would have to get a ton of increased crit chance, or like base crit from corrupting these to get base spell crit, maybe even having to use Assassin's Mark, and then taking the maximum curses equal to your power charges stuff, or using anathema. But long story short, it's really hard to actually get crit capped on something like this. So I would not be going Perfect Agony. I do not think it's worth the investment unless you get a massive amount of base crit from somewhere else that I'm not thinking of. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. I am pretty stoked. I think this build looks badass. If anybody tries it, please let me know how it goes. I really like to use like Gloomfang here, but a similar problem. It's very hard to fix your crit with Gloomfang. I think you can get pretty close on it, honestly, just because we get so much crit from our Ascendancy. We just have to pick up a little bit more crit here. I know it only says 60, but that's because I don't have any crit scaling because we don't need it. But you could pretty much crit cap with this. It might completely destroy your sustain, but could also feel incredible. It's something to consider. All right, I'm done. Sorry. So I've done this build a billion times, so I'm not going to talk about it very much. I've uploaded so many different variations of my channel over the years. Well, I say over the years. I've been doing YouTube content for like a year. But anyways, literally the first video on my YouTube channel is a quad CoC bow build. The League Manaforged was released. Anyways, yeah, it's typical quad CoC Ice Nova bullshit. This is just like the Cospri build. Double the damage, probably maybe double the clunk. Hard to say. Depends on what you prefer. One thing I will say is really funny about this is if you use Scorpion's Call, which you can afford to eat the damage because the damage in this is so high, look at the AoE on this Ice Nova. It is comical how big that is. I can't say I would recommend it, but it is something you could do. Okay, that's it. Like I said, I'll include the PoE in case anybody's curious, but not much new ground treaded here, honestly. So I want to talk about just some weird stuff that I'm not going to have time to actually like make builds on, but other cool things that maybe you guys want to mess around with. But so just Rebuke of the Vault just in general on this Ascendancy, getting 7 base crit on this thing is absolutely ridiculous. It is a 1000 DPS weapon. Giving 7 base crit to it is hilarious. So obviously this is just very good for just any attack, but you can even, if you want to get real weird with it, like I tend to do, and just like, you know, shoehorn CoC into everything, Spellblade, as you can see, is giving our Rolling Magma like 94% more damage, just because it's just like adding 1000 damage to the top of it. Or I guess it's a little bit more because it takes 135% of it. So yeah. Okay, so it's like adding 1300 flat damage to our Rolling Magma, which is ridiculous. I mean, obviously the Ascendancy is really good with Rolling Magma because of the thing I mentioned with the random directions stuff and then additional projectiles. But yeah, besides all that stuff, obviously you can do Mjolnir stuff. Adding 7 base crit to this is awesome. It makes this a really good cast on crit weapon now, which is awesome because it's already a good trigger weapon. Same with Runecraft. Sire of Shards. Unfortunately, this item is like still power crept kind of out, but I love it, so I had to bring it up. Getting to play cast on crit with this is really cool. Quill Rain. It's really unfortunate that Quill Rain in this game has 30% less damage on it because in PoE 2, this actually says 30% less damage with attacks. And if you had a 12% base crit bow that attacked 3 times a second in PoE 1 with no damage penalty to spells, you could do the most comical shit with that, right? Like you could have like cast on crit like enabled by like, you know, I don't know, lightning arrow cast on crit. Why not? You attack a billion times a second, tornado shot cast on crit. That one's like okay already, but You get that point. You could just play like crazy clear skills on in addition. You could still technically do this. You just have to eat that 30% less cost, which makes it a little less appealing, I guess. But yeah, I'm sure there's way more weird stuff than just the stuff I was thinking offhand. So if you guys can think of any stuff, please let me know. I know there's way more stuff you can do on this Ascendancy. I think it sounds awesome on like that one node alone, but it's you get to spend 6 more points, you know. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. I don't have much else to talk about on this Ascendancy. I'm really excited for it. I am like ridiculously excited for this event. I was kind of bummed that it's like only a week away because I have so many more builds I need to make, so many more things to try. I still need to get the rest off and do some practice runs, some watchstone runs and stuff, which I'll be doing. I guess like honestly tomorrow maybe, and then over the next few weeks. So I have so much to do, but I cannot wait. All right, poops and butts out.